Jonathan Taylor versus Christian McCaffrey. The 101 versus the 102. I'm on the McCaffrey side. Robbie's on the Taylor side. We're going to talk about each one and why we think they both deserve to be the RB1 off the board. We're going to talk about that right now. Let's ride. Welcome back in. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Robbie, you're on the Jonathan Taylor side. I'm on the Christian McCaffrey side. You have the higher ranked guy. So why don't you just go ahead and start this off and tell people why Jonathan Taylor should be the RB1 over Christian McCaffrey.
Kev, when you play with fire, you get burned. And I feel like that's what you're doing, getting a little cheeky here, putting CMC above Jonathan Taylor, man. They're both fantastic picks. And if you have a first two pick in your drafts this August, you definitely will be lucky to get either one of these guys. But if you have the choice, you got to go Jonathan Taylor, man. Since he took over as the full-time starter in week 11 of his rookie season, he's only had 4 games of under 15 points in PPR scoring. Only 4 games, man. That's fantastic. He's extremely safe. But then there's not that trade out where you don't get that ceiling because he's had at least 5 games of 30 points or more since, and that includes his week 11 last season against Buffalo, where he put up a 53 burger and basically was a week ender for all of his fantasy opponents. And this is when his quarterbacks were a 39-year-old Phillip Rivers with a shot arm and Carson Wentz. And now he gets Matt Ryan, who I know he's old, I get it, but he was third in deep pass percentage rate last season. And that's with like nobody, right? He had Calvin Ridley for a handful of games. He had Kyle Pitts and Russell Gage, and that's really it. And he was third in deep pass percentage rate, accuracy rates. So, I mean, we're talking about a guy that's going to be able to go down the field and complete it. And so now you can't stack the box against Jonathan Taylor like you maybe could have before, where they're going to have to respect those passes down to Pittman or these other wide receivers. So, I mean, I honestly think that this could get better, right? We have the touchdown totals, right? He was on pace for 23 in his rookie year from when he took over as the starter. He had 20 total last year. And so he's a touchdown machine. And now he gets this upgrade at quarterback. And the final thing is he isn't a zero in the passing game. Some people think he's like a Derrick Henry or a Nick Chubb. No way. He had 51 targets this last season for 40 receptions and 360 yards. That's a really solid receiving floor for someone who's considered, quote unquote, not a pass catcher. And if he just gets a tiniest bump and he's getting closer to that 50 range, man, I think we're seeing a guy who's going to score an average of 24 points per game. And that's going to be the running back one, because when you look at Christian McCaffrey's side, I think they're going to dial him back. You don't lose your star player 2 seasons in a row and go through the terrible seasons that they've had and then continue to pile on work, right? He was always on the field for 95, 98% of the snaps. And I think they're going to start to dial that back a little bit with him. He's obviously a bigger risk concern. He's had a lot of soft tissue injury between hamstring, glute, shoulders, one to his ankle this last year. And that's ended his season the last 2 years. And being 5'10", 205 pounds versus 5'10", 226 for JT, we know that there's not the same injury risk. So I think gone are the days where CMC's getting 400 touches and Jonathan Taylor's just getting started and could get better with a better quarterback at the helm.
Well, one, I'm going to say this is that one, the obvious that we've never seen a running back finish as the RB1 2 years in a row, you have to go all the way back to 2001 when it happened with Priest Holmes. And so that was a long time ago. So we have a big case here that it's probably unlikely to happen again.
He doesn't have to finish first. He just has to beat CMC, right?
Which is true. But if you're taking, but if you're using, most people are using the 101, you have that first pick, right? You don't pick again until pick 24, right? Yep. So that back half of the second. And if Taylor somehow, let's say he's a good year and he finishes RB6, RB7 this year, not bad year by any measures, but is he worth that 101? Obviously, the answer would be no. He wasn't. And he has to finish, in my eyes, top 2, top 3 to be able to really work out, right? And it's very possible that it could. But there's also other things here that first of all, we need to remember who we're talking about here. And we're talking about Christian McCaffrey, in my eyes, the best fantasy running back we may have ever seen in terms of what he brings to the table, right? His 2019 season was absolutely off the charts with his 29.3 fantasy points per game, right? Now, yes, the last 2 years he has suffered injury, but last year, in the games that he played last year, he still averaged 14.1 carries per game, almost 6 targets per game, an 18% target share, There was no signs whatsoever of him falling off. He finished 4th in yards created per touch, 2nd in breakaway run rate, and 4th in expected points added as well. And if you look at this offense, actually, this offense could be better than what it was last year. I mean, we know that the quarterback situation was awful. Yes, Baker Mayfield is an upgrade. Who knows how much of an upgrade, but it still is an upgrade nonetheless. But this offensive line is going to be much better than what it was last year, because they went out and they drafted Akeem Aquanu. He's going to obviously be their left tackle, but then they also went out and added Bradley Bozeman, which is going to be a big upgrade at center. He ranked 11th in pass blocking and 18th in run blocking last year, respectively. He was the 11th highest grade center per PFF in 2021. Then they also went out and added Austin Corbett, who's also the 22nd highest graded guard last year. So both of those moves are going to help this offensive line tremendously, which was terrible last year. And Christian McCaffrey, in the 5 games that he was healthy last year, averaged 24 fantasy points per game in those 5 games that he played last year. Better than what Jonathan Taylor did. Jonathan Taylor's biggest thing that concerns me is the pass catching with him, right? He doesn't have that high upside in terms of targets, right? In terms of, he's not going to be a guy who's going to see, 90, 100 targets, right? Where Christian McCaffrey, as long as the only caveat with Christian McCaffrey is simply what? The injury. That's it. It's is he going to stay healthy? Because when he's healthy, he is a true cheat code. He is a game changer for what he provides. He has very few dud weeks. Almost every week he plays, he is an RB1. You can lock him in. With Jonathan Taylor, again, great last year. 19.5 carries per game, 3.1 targets per game, 1,800 rushing yards, 20 touchdowns. Fantastic, right? But he was 18th in target share, 20th in yards per route run. So he is not somebody that is heavily utilized in the passing game. Nyheim Hines, we know, is going to be involved in the passing game here in this offense. And so if he suffers any sort of touchdown regression, which he's probably going to, it's going to hurt him a lot more than somebody like Christian McCaffrey, who, even if he does lose a little bit more of the carries per se, he's not going to lose his pass catching work that he provides, and he's still going to be heavily involved. This offense doesn't have a ton of weapons here, right? We're not talking about an offense that's loaded. We're talking about an offense with DJ Moore and then the ghost of Robbie Anderson, and then you have Terrace Marshall, no real tight end. And so this passing game is still going to be involved through him. And so the only argument you can make about him is the injury, and that's it. If he stays healthy this year, he is absolutely the RB1, and people are going to be kicking themselves for not taking him. We can't just live in a world where, he's going to get hurt, or you can't play fantasy football like that. We are trying to win, and I would argue that Jonathan Taylor, his volume is what he's going to need. If he loses any of that, if this Colts offense becomes more pass heavy, that hurts Jonathan Taylor, because he's not going to be as involved as a pass catcher. And so that is what worries me about Taylor. That's why I have him at 2. And Christian McCaffrey is just a easy, locked in number 1.
Yeah, I think what the big saying is you can't always win your draft in the first round, but you can definitely lose it. And that's the thing with Jonathan Taylor, is that there's no downside to picking him. He is going to be a top 3, top 4 guy. Like, absolutely, right? The touchdowns are there, and I don't know why you think they're going to regress, because the offense is only going to get better with a Matt Ryan. I don't think they're going to regress. They could get better, right? So he has the safety and the volume. He hasn't been hurt going back to high school. I couldn't find his high school stats, so maybe he's never been injured since he started playing football. So you don't have the injury risk any more than any other running back, probably one of the least in the NFL, given his size and his build. And then you have just the overall volume, right? It's 3 things that you love. So he is going to be a safe, fantastic pick with that upside. He had 22.5 last year, and I think it can only get better. The one side, obviously, you can talk about the injuries, but I'm not going to even talk about the injuries, because I think Christian McCaffrey, they're going to bring him back a little bit. So that's my worry for him, is that you're not going to see that 27, 28, 29, 25 total anymore, because he's going to be losing some of those carries, some of those touches through the air. So that's the actual bottom line, Kev Steele.
If you look at Taylor last year, over the first half of the season, he was not as heavily involved in the offense. He was still productive. But if you go back and look, because we saw a shift from them from really the weeks 1 through 8, where they were more pass heavy, to where in the second half of the season, where Carson Wentz was just atrocious, they reined him back. They didn't allow Carson Wentz to pass as much, because if you look at his snap share the first 8 weeks, it was 53%, 49, 49, 44, 51, 63, and 64%, right? Not bad, but not great. But then as that shift happens, that's when we see them go 76, 69, 81, 86, 70, 72, 92, 81, 74, 92, which is a pretty much right in line with what we saw from them in the passing game, where the first 8 weeks of the season, they threw the ball a hell of a lot more than what they did. So if you're expecting them to throw the ball more, it's going to hurt Jonathan Taylor. Now they have Matt Ryan, and if
This
Matt
team
Ryan
is not built through Matt Ryan. It's built through the run with Jonathan Taylor, right? Like, we're not debating that. They're not going to all of a sudden, oh, we need to start putting this on the back of Matt Ryan.
I'm not expecting the Colts to jump to like a top 5 passing offense, but I definitely think that we see them throw the ball. I mean, because if you look over the second half, I mean, we see 20 pass attempts against the Bills, 22 against Houston, 12 against New England, 28, 27. Like, they were not throwing the ball at all. And I don't expect that you're going to see that. I think you're going to see something much more in line to where, you're probably seeing 32, 34 pass attempts per game, which isn't a crazy number, but it's also
league average.
Much more league average. And so I do think that hurts Jonathan Taylor a little bit. And to say that if he goes from 20 touchdowns to 15, still a really solid number, that's going to hurt him more because he does not catch the ball nearly at the high as a rate as somebody like Christian McCaffrey or DeAndre Swift and some of these other running backs do. I mean, you look at Taylor in terms of targets. He only had 2 games last year where he saw over 5 targets. 3. I don't want to shortchange him. He had 8 in week 10. He had 7 in week 1, and he had 5 in week 12. Other than that, he had 2 weeks where he had no targets, and then most of it every week was 2 or 3 targets every single week. So it makes his ceiling so much lower for him to hit. There's nothing wrong with 50 targets, but that's like half of what you could expect from Christian McCaffrey if he stays healthy. Maybe even less than half. Like, Christian McCaffrey had a 124 target season in 2019, excuse me, and in 2018 had a 100 target season. Last year, he was still getting almost a 20% target share in that offense. He's probably going to see that again. And so we know how much more a target is worth than a carry, and I always lean towards the running back who's going to be more involved in the passing game.
No, we're running along, man. This has been a good first throwdown. I'm pumped for the rest that we have coming the way for the listeners.
Yes. So let us know in the comments section below, who are you on? Are you on Christian McCaffrey? Are you on the Jonathan Taylor side? Do you like winning your league, or do you like coming in 4th? We'll figure that out in the future. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content. We will hit you on the next one. Bye.